Secondly, blessed are those who mourn. What does it mean to mourn? Well, this word mourn, there's a few words for mourning and grieving in the New Testament. This is the strongest of them all. And it's a deep grief before God over sin, whether in ourselves or others. A good example of this is, and again, I refer back to 1 Samuel. And the story of Samuel is about Samuel and the first king of Israel, Saul. Well, Samuel was getting old. His sons weren't doing such a great job. He was trying to give responsibility to his sons. And basically the elders of Israel said, Samuel, you're getting too old. And Israel basically fired Samuel. He said, we want a king to be like the other nations. So Samuel got pushed out. He had to train his replacement, like some of these software companies and some of these other people, they had to train his replacement. So he actually poured his heart. He talked to Saul, and he tried to bring him up to speed and told him of the spiritual responsibilities he would have. But Saul at first was really good, but then soon, and what we tend to remember is his failures. And so it came to the place where God spoke to Samuel and said to Samuel, I greatly regret that I have set up Saul as king. This is Samuel hearing from God that God greatly regrets that he has made Saul king. Now what would you say? Right? You've been fired. You've been out. You're out of the company. And your replacement, this young, tall, good-looking guy, is failing. And the typical person would say, that's great, and gloat. Told you so. Serves you right for getting rid of me when I'm in my prime. Not Samuel. Samuel thought like God thought, and he mourned. It said in that passage that he cried all night. That's what it means to mourn. What is the opposite of mourning over our sin? You wouldn't think it would be blessed are those that are happy and enjoy life. Well, not always. Blessing are they that mourn. And I'm not sure that being happy and joyful really is the opposite of mourning. I was reading in Zephaniah chapter 1 and verse 12, and I think this verse gives us the kernel of really what the world is. Rather than happy opposed to mourning over their sin and conduct. It says this is judgment against Jerusalem. It shall come to pass in that time that I will search Jerusalem, and I'll say a flashlight, but it's with lamps, and punish the men who are settled in complacency. I would say that's the issue. People aren't mourning over their sin. They're settled in complacency. Who say in their heart, and why are people settled in complacency? Because it says in this verse, the Lord will not do good, nor will he do evil. Doesn't it seem like the Lord is detached from us? We pray, and there's people that are godly individuals that we see have serious health problems. And that can be discouraging and be complacent. But God says not to be complacent, that he is and knows the beginning from the end. And it was a wonderful illustration this morning of this person that had understood that his wife passing away unexpectedly was really in God's plan, and he was good with it. But this says, blessed are those that mourn. What does society say about mourning over sin? It's really even a sin to call sin in our society, isn't it? I mean, things that are evil are called good, and things that are good are called evil. Romans chapter 1 talks about sin, and these are things that should grieve us. Not giving God his exalted place. Verse 21 of Romans chapter 1 says that because although they knew God, they did not glorify Him as God. Or in verse 25, exchanging the truth of God for the lie. These are things we should mourn over. Exchanging or women and men leaving the natural use. Verses 26 and 27. And now Romans chapter 1, verse 29 through 32. Just a list of sins that should cause us to mourn. Being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness, gossips, I'm substituting for whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undeserving, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful, who knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things, these are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. We should be mourning over this sin. So blessed are those that mourn, but it says, for they shall be comforted. Now, just think about the crowd that Jesus was preaching to. Where did Jesus preach the Sermon on the Mount? He preached it in Galilee. What was true about Galilee? Well, Galilee was filled with individuals that were known for their immorality. They were filled with Gentiles, filled with those individuals that weren't known for their religious conduct. They were the group of the least religious, most depraved, and they would be considered deplorables in Israel. But many were complacent about their own sin, but blessed were those who knew their wrong and were grieved over it and grieved about sin in general and are grieved over their sin. And if we are grieved over our sin, blessed God. Count mourning over sin as a blessing. Slay the thought that God is detached and complacency is the way to go in this life.